Good morning and welcome to the Point. This week in Flint, two things happened that some people there have been clamoring for months. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, came to Flint to talk about the water crisis. That was one of the things that people had been hoping for. Another that they had been demanding was for Governor Rick Snyder to face the people of Flint directly. It both happened at the same forum, at a high school in Flint, where the president was scheduled to speak. And then in a somewhat surprising announcement, Governor Snyder walked in first. When his name was announced, the boos began, and it didn't change during his comments. Here is that uncomfortable moment from Flint.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Let me begin. Good afternoon. Let me begin by saying I understand why you're angry and frustrated. I want to come here today to apologize, to say I'm sorry and I will fix this.
The governor, to his credit, finished his remarks, even though, as I said, it was an uncomfortable moment. As uncomfortable as it was for the governor, so it was for those of us observing, which led me to ask Congressman Dan Kildee, the U.S. representative from the area, if the governor's appearance was a good idea. Was the decision on the part of the governor a good idea to speak in front of this crowd today?
Well, that's a good question. I suppose there's a certain amount of justice that comes with people being able to express themselves, and I got to give the governor at least a little bit of credit for having the guts to stand up in front of this crowd. But I hope he listened to them. I hope he just didn't hear a cacophony of boos, but I hope he listened to some of the things that were being said to him. Own this problem. Fix this problem. He may never get these people to like him, but if he wants their respect, he'll stand up for what he did, and he'll bring the resources equal to the problem that everyone acknowledges he created. His own task force says it was on his watch. So, I'll give him credit for coming. I'll give him a lot more credit if this is meaningful and not just a talking point so that he can go to some other audience and tell the story about how he came to Flint and stood up to a crowd that didn't like him.
Then it was time for the president to speak to the crowd gathered at Northwestern High School in Flint. When he walked in, it was clear he was who the crowd had come to see. When we come back, an extended segment of To the Point, an opportunity to hear the bulk of what the president had to say about and to the people of Flint. That's next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. President Obama was in Flint this week to talk about the water crisis and talk to the people of Flint about how he thinks both the federal and state government can help in the recovery. His message was direct, and he talked specifically about the challenges that people in Flint face and how he hopes they can turn their anger and their fear into a positive force.
I do want to just tell you what I know, based on not just what I've been reading in the papers, but what our top scientists have told me. The first is that while you are waiting to get your pipes replaced, you need to have a filter installed and use that filter. And if you do use that filter, then the water is safe to consume for children over the age of 6 and who are not pregnant. Now, hold on a second. Don't just start shouting, okay? Because this is the problem. We're going to have to solve this problem. And if people don't listen to each other, then it's not going to get fixed. So I'm telling you, And I promise you, I'm really good at stirring folks up. So if I want to just come here and stir folks up, I know how to do that. But that's not actually going to solve the problem. All right? So I'm telling you what I know, because I guarantee you that the scientists who work for me, if they tell me something, which I'm saying in front of all those cameras, turns out to be wrong, that person will not have a job. So although I understand the fear and concern that people have, and it is entirely legitimate, what the science tells us at this stage is you should not drink any of the water that is not filtered, but if you get the filter and use it properly, that water can be consumed. That's point number one. And you can get those filters free, and people will help install them if you need help, particularly seniors who may have trouble going back and forth and trying to get a whole bunch of bottles of water and so forth. So that's information that I trust and I believe. That's point number one. Point number two, every child in Flint who may have consumed water during the course of this tragedy, and that is the overwhelming majority of children here, should get checked. Now, the reason that's important is because lead is a serious issue, and if undiagnosed and not dealt with, it can lead to some long-term problems. But, and this is really important, so I want everybody to pay attention, if you know that your child may have been exposed and you go to a health clinic, a doctor, a provider, and are working with them, then your child will be fine. And the reason I can say that with some confidence is not just based on science, but based on the fact that, keep in mind that it wasn't until the 80s where we started banning lead in paint, lead in toys, lead in gasoline. So if you are my age or older, or maybe even a little bit younger, you got some lead in your system when you were growing up. You did. You know, I am sure that somewhere when I was 2 years old, I was taking a chip of paint, tasting it, and I got some lead. Or sometimes toys were painted with lead, and you were chewing on it. Now, I say that not to make light of the situation. We know now what we didn't know then, which is it can cause problems if children get exposed to lead at elevated levels. But the point is that as long as kids are getting good health care and folks are paying attention and they're getting a good education and they have community support and they're getting some good home training and they are in a community that is loving and nurturing and thriving, these kids will be fine. And I don't want anybody to start thinking that somehow all the kids in Flint are going to have problems for the rest of their lives, because that's not true. That is not true, and I don't want that stigma to be established in the minds of kids. I mean, we've learned a lot of things since I was a kid. I used to have adults blowing smoke in my face all the time. You know, we didn't use seat belts. We wrapped, dry cleaning bags around us and thought that was funny. Folks didn't know. but the reason I think this is important is because I heard from a lot of folks who were saying how moms and dads were feeling guilty, they're feeling sad, they're feeling depressed. Oh Lord, how is this going to affect my child? And it's right to be angry, but you can't be passive. You can't just suddenly sit back and sink into despair. Our kids will be fine, but you have to now take action. Don't wait for somebody else to reach out and ask whether your child has gotten a checkup recently. We just expanded Medicaid. Go take your child to that doctor. Use that health system. And so community organizations, churches, et cetera, one of the things that we need to do is, and I've talked to the governor and the mayor about this, is set up a system of outreach so that we're getting everybody as a village looking out for every child, making sure that they're getting checked up, making sure they've got pediatric care, making sure they're being tested effectively, making sure then that they're getting nutritious food. Just to give you an example, we know that if kids are getting vegetables and eaten properly, that just by itself is going to have some impact on any effects of lead. But I know that here in Flint, there are whole neighborhoods that don't even have a supermarket. So we're going to have to figure out how to get supermarkets in those communities. And in the meantime, we got to help make sure that those kids are getting the nutrition they need. So I say all this just to indicate you should be angry, but channel that anger. You should be hurt, but don't sink into despair. And most of all, do not somehow communicate to our children here in this city that they're going to be saddled with problems with the rest of their life, because they will not. They'll do just fine, just like I did fine with a single mom, and a lot of you did fine growing up in a tough neighborhood. They'll make it as long as we're there for them and looking after them and doing the right thing for them and giving them the resources that they need. Don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. I talked longer than I was going to. But I feel strongly about this whole issue with kids now. Kids rise to the expectations we set for them. A lot of kids in Flint already got some crosses they got to bear. They've already got people telling them, oh, it's too tough for you because you're black or you're poor, or they will do fine as long as we do right by them. And that's my intention. And set high expectations for them. Just a couple more points. What happened here is just an extreme example, an extreme and tragic case of what's happening in a lot of places around the country. We've seen unacceptably high levels of lead in townships along the Jersey Shore and in North Carolina's major cities. We've seen it in the capitals of South Carolina and Mississippi. And even where not long ago lead-contaminated drinking water was found right down the street from the United States Capitol. So Flint is just a tip of the iceberg in terms of us reinvesting in our communities. Just like we've seen bridges fall and levees break. So we've got to break that mindset. These things aren't a coincidence. They're the same mindset that left Flint's water unsafe to drink. And it's self-destructive when we don't invest in our communities. Because, you know, a lot of times the people who are against government spending, they'll say, well, the private sector is the key. The private sector is the key for our economy. Free markets and free enterprise are great, but companies won't invest in a place where your infrastructure is crumbling and your roads are broke. You're not going to start a business or be able to recruit outstanding staff if there's no safe drinking water in the city. So my hope is that this begins a national conversation about what we need to do to invest in future generations. And it's no secret that on this pipeline of neglect, a lot of times it's the most poor folks who are left behind. It's working people who are left behind. We see it in communities across the Midwest that haven't recovered since the plant shut down. We see it on inner city corners where they might be able to drink the water, but they can't find a job. We see it in the rural hills of Appalachia. We got to break that mindset that says that neighborhood over there, that's not my problem. Those kids over there, they don't look like my kids exactly, so I don't have to worry about them. Out of sight, out of mind. We've got to break that attitude that says somehow there's an us and them, and remind ourselves that there's just one big we, the American family, and everybody's got to look out for each other. Because the kids here in Flint aren't those kids, they're our kids. That's what Scripture teaches us. But I'm not going to start preaching in front of some pastors. So, let me just close by saying this. Look, I know this has been a scary time. I know this is disappointing. You've been let down. But, you know, there is a sermon about a phoenix rising from these ashes. And there is the opportunity out of this complete screw-up, this painful tragedy, this neglect, this disappointment, to actually pull together and make for a better future. Sometimes it takes a crisis for everybody to focus their attention. Because there had been a lot of crises going on in Flint. They just weren't as loud and noisy, and nobody noticed. There are a lot of small, quiet crises going on in the lives of people around this country. And this helps lift it up. And when we see it, and we understand it, and we feel it, then maybe we start making a connection with each other. And that begins to change our mindset and improve our politics and improve our government to make it more responsive and more accountable. And the good news is that that's the natural mindset of our young people. That's why I'm so hopeful about the people of Flint. That's why I'm so hopeful about America generally, is I meet young people all the time. And they've got a mindset just like little Miss Flint here. She decides, I'm just going right to the president because I think we can fix this. Or the mindset of Isaiah raising $15,000 to help an elementary school where he's never been. That's America. That's who we are at our best. We are a nation of individuals, and we should be proud everything that we can accomplish on our own through hard work and grit and looking after our own families and making sure we're raising our children right. But we don't do these things alone. Ultimately, our success is dependent on each other. Our success is dependent on each other. I have had the privilege of being the President of the United States, a big office, an office that gives me enormous power and enormous responsibility, but the thing I've learned in that job is that I can't do it by myself. I can't fix every problem on my own. I need a mother-in-law who helps Michelle and me raise Malia and Sasha. I need incredible staff who are carrying out our policies to sign people up for health care. I've got to have our incredible men and women in uniform who are willing to go overseas and fight on behalf of our freedom. I've got to have governors and mayors who are willing to work with me to get things done in their states and in their cities. And most of all, I need fellow citizens who share the values that built this great country and are willing to work with me and work together to make it better. I said this before, the most important office in a democracy is the office of citizen. It's more important than the president, more important than any senator or governor or mayor. It is the idea that each of us has something to contribute. Each of us has something to give back. So Flint, I'm here not just to say I've got your back. I'm here not just to say that you will get help. I'm also here to say you've got power. I'm also here to say you count. I'm also here to say that you can make a difference and rebuild this city better than ever. And you'll have a friend and partner in the President of the United States. God bless you. God bless Flint. God bless Michigan. God bless the United States of America.
When we come back, a final thought about the president's visit. To the point. One of the concerns that people have expressed to me about the water crisis in Flint is what happens when the focus goes away and the television cameras go home. This week's visit by the president refocused the energy on Flint and may help find more resources and more answers to solve their problems. I hope you'll join us next week. To the point.